Welcome to Chapter 19, Food Resources. These are the points that we're going to be looking at in this chapter. World food problems. The way it stands now in the world, there's enough food for all people. However, as population increases, food supply or the ability to grow food does not increase. Mainly land allotment for that. Most of the farmable acres are being farmed, and so there is an issue as far as being able to feed that expanding population, as well as delivery of the food sources to areas where food is needed. It's not always grown exactly where all the people are. So when we're looking at people in other countries, problems being undernourished or malnourished. And undernourished, we call that a diet in our country, but undernourished means that these men and women are getting less than that 365 days a year, every day of their life, basically. That has very, very bad repercussions on them health-wise. Their immune systems do not work correctly. If they're children, they do not grow to their potential, their genetic potential. And if you look at malnourished, it's not enough protein or vitamins. Some people are getting rice, and rice fills your belly. It's not that it doesn't have any value to it whatsoever. It has a little bit, but it certainly doesn't have all the vitamins, minerals, and protein that a growing child needs. And without protein, bones don't develop correctly, the brain does not develop, cells don't develop. If you think about it, and I continually tell you, you're a bunch of little carbon bonds running around making proteins, it's because those proteins make your body's world go around. And so without good cell reproduction in your body, without proteins, you're not metabolizing correctly. Your body is more prone to disease and more prone to developing abnormally. Now we go down to overnutrition, and that would be us, most of us anyway. We're overweight or we're obese. Much of that comes from a processed diet that we have. If you're in the grocery store, you should be eating basically off of the edges. Stay away from the middle. You should be eating in the dairy section. You should be eating in the meat section and the produce section. Stay out of the freezers, stay out of the ice cream. But in those sections, and those are usually on the edges, not in the middle. And that's good, healthy food for us. And so, however, you can be an American and you can have plenty to eat and you can be eating the wrong things and not getting enough protein and not getting enough vitamins. You have to be very careful when you're vegan or vegetarian that you're eating lots of legumes, and that would be soybeans like tofu or chickpeas, hummus, not hummus this time, or it is hummus, sorry, long weekend. It is hummus, not humus this time. Let's see, kidney beans, navy beans, those all give you excellent sources of protein. Then, a famine is going without food for a long period of time, and I mean desperate. You are desperate for food, and people are dying of starvation. This can be from drought, because they can't grow anything, or from civil unrest. A good example of this is what's going on in Syria right now. There are areas in Syria that are so war-torn that the government troops are surrounding areas and not letting these people get out to food. If they try to get food, they shoot at them. They're doing this to keep so that the people will not disobey the government. These are graphs. If you look at these graphs, and it tells the story. Technology has increased our yields. Technology of keeping the soil more fertile, employing or utilizing fertilizers, utilizing herbicides, and also creating genetically modified crop seeds so that they're getting larger yields. All of that together. You manage your pests, you manage your weeds, you manage your soil, and you come up with a genetically superior corn or bean that you use, you're going to increase your yields. And so that's what you're seeing in this first graph. But with utilizing all of this together, putting it all together, look at the second graph. We are not increasing the amount of grain per person because, look at the first sentence, population is increasing and world food production cannot keep pace. Population is growing faster than our food production. We are going to be in a deficit probably by the turn of the century. And remember again, first thing I said was that most all the land is under production for farming. So this is an issue. Clean water is an issue. How do we change it? There's going to be some food for thought. No pun intended. Maintaining grain stockpiles. You need to know carryover stocks, and they should be 70 days. As of 2000, we're below 70 days. This year we had, I don't think the tally is in quite yet, but we had a bumper crop this year in the United States. However, Brazil had drought, so their crops were not as good, and notice this is a world carryover. So we're looking at trying to keep it around 70 days, and that's just not an arbitrary day or quantity that they came up with. People worked on this and came out with a mathematical equation and decided that if we had 70 days, we could probably make it through a year and through to another growing season. So if you have a catastrophe for a growing season, you're going to have crops somewhere. So you're going to have some crop coming off, just not as much as you usually do. So if you have 70 days worth of crop, it should get you through another year so that you're ready to go. Another problem in this, notice the second thing, more grain is going toward feeding livestock or ethanol production. Let's look at feeding livestock. United States eats more meat, whether it be chicken, beef, or pork, than any other country per capita. However, as more countries are becoming more affluent, they're eating more meat. Therefore, there's a need for more cattle, a need for more hogs, more chicken. They eat grain that is produced. So if you're feeding more grain to them, you have less grain to go around. It's kind of like the food pyramid. If there's lots of energy at the bottom, but as it makes it through to that next level, there's less energy available. So if you think about it, if we would all go and be vegetarians, and we would leave that middleman or that cow out, we would have much more food to go around. So that might be the food for thought. Maybe we need to decrease our meat consumption. Also, when we're talking about grain production, we've already talked about ethanol production and the use of corn, but also the use of sugarcane, switchgrass, and any way you slice it, if you're utilizing land, doesn't even have to be corn, but the land that would be growing a food crop and having it grow an ethanol crop, then you've lost space for food. So this is an issue as well. Poverty equates to poor nutrition. In developing countries, Africa, the interior of South America, interior of China, people are hungry and they're poor. But even in the United States, we have poverty. And people who are in poverty tend to not eat leafy green vegetables and good lean cuts of meat. They eat from the middle of the grocery store. They eat processed foods that are not giving them the nutrition that they need, but certainly are filling their bellies. So poverty, no matter where you are, equals poor nutrition in most cases. Second, malnutrition more common in an urban area than a rural area. Why? Why would people in a city be more apt to have malnutrition than in rural areas? Rural areas are where they're growing food, so there's more availability of vegetables, fresh fruit, things that are packed with vitamins. If people are poor and they're in an urban area, food is scarce. They don't have anywhere to grow food. They're packed in there. They're in very, very tight living conditions and unsanitary. Think about even in the United States, not that people live in unsanitary conditions, but certainly crowded conditions, and they're going to go to the grocery store and they're going to buy the least expensive food that they can find and the largest quantity so that it will last the longest. It's always best, we talked about this, we started out with this, and we talked about, why is it better to buy fresh fruit and vegetables in season? Well, because they're packed with nutrition. And so it's best to grow the food close to where it's needed, if it can be, so that it holds its largest nutritive value that it can have, and you don't have to pay so much for the transportation. I find it interesting that the world eats basically 15 plant species. And I would guess, and I would think that this 50% would be higher than 50%, comes from rice, wheat, and corn. So most people are living off of grain. And certainly you need grains in your diet. I'm not going to tell you you don't. They should be whole grains. They should not be pureed, like flour. And that gives you the fiber that you need from the cereals, if they are whole grain. This just gives you an idea of how much of what is grown. And what interested me when I first saw this was that sugarcane, there's more sugarcane grown than anything. We don't need to eat a lot of extra sugar, and it's probably the least nutritive of all of these. Corn next, and I just always assumed soybeans would be right after that, but if you're looking at worldwide production, wheat, rice, very close together there, and potatoes. So those outweigh soybeans, and then you go on down and you look down where the beans are, and these are legumes, and so these are going to be like navy beans and kidney beans type thing, and down there quite a ways, but very, very good source of protein. That is the end of part 1. We will start with animals as food at part 2.